Your tomato plants are loaded, heavy with fruit, more than you've ever grown, and almost every one of them is still hard and green. Frost is coming, and you're starting to panic that the whole crop will be lost. Here's the first thing you need to know. It's not because they need more sun. That's the myth that has people doing exactly the wrong thing. The real reason they won't ripen is something else entirely, and once you understand it, you can still save nearly every one of those green tomatoes. Let me clear up that sun myth right away, because it's the single most common misunderstanding about ripening tomatoes, and it sends people in completely the wrong direction. We see tomatoes basking on the plant in summer, and we assume sunlight is what turns them red, that the sun's rays are somehow painting the fruit. So when tomatoes won't ripen, the instinct is to strip away leaves to let more sun in, or to set green ones on a hot, bright windowsill. But that's not how it works. Sunlight is not what ripens a tomato. The leaves do the work of feeding the plant through the season, and once a tomato has reached full size, the green fruit already has everything it needs to ripen. It doesn't need the sun's light to turn red at all. So if it's not sunlight, what is it? Two things, and they're the key to this whole video. The first is temperature, warmth. The second is a natural ripening gas the tomato produces itself, called ethylene. Those two together are what turn a tomato from green to red, and understanding them is what lets you take control of the whole process. Let's start with temperature, because it's almost always the real culprit when your tomatoes stall out green. A tomato develops its red color from a pigment called lycopene, and the plant produces that pigment best within a specific temperature range, roughly the 70s Fahrenheit, somewhere around 20 to 25 degrees Celsius. That's the sweet spot. And here's the part that explains your stubborn green crop. When temperatures drift outside that range, lycopene production slows down or stops entirely. When it's too cold, those cool autumn days and chilly nights dropping down toward the 50s Fahrenheit and below, the fruit essentially hits pause. It just sits there, fully grown, waiting, because it's too cool for the ripening pigment to form. That's why a beautiful warm summer ripens tomatoes in a steady stream, but a cool spell, or the arrival of autumn, leaves you staring at a plant full of green fruit that won't budge. It isn't broken, it's cold, and it works at the other extreme too, which surprises people. In a brutal heat wave, when temperatures climb up past the mid-90s Fahrenheit, the low to mid-30s Celsius, lycopene production also shuts down. So in the peak of a scorching summer, ripening can stall just as it does in the cold. The fruit sits there green and hard in the heat, waiting for things to settle back into that comfortable range. So both ends of the thermometer can freeze your tomatoes in place, but for most people, staring at a green crop, especially heading into fall, the problem is that it's simply gotten too cool. Now the second piece, and this is the one that hands you all the power. Ethylene. Tomatoes belong to a special group of fruits called climacteric fruits, and what that means is wonderfully useful. They continue to ripen after they've been picked. A climacteric fruit produces ethylene gas, and that gas is the actual ripening trigger, signaling the fruit to soften, sweeten, and change color. Bananas do this, apples do this, and tomatoes do this. It's the reason a green-picked tomato can ripen to full red on your counter, with no plant and no sun involved at all. The fruit ripens itself, from the inside, driven by its own ethylene, as long as it's warm enough. Put those two facts together, and you can see the whole picture forming. A tomato ripens when it's warm enough for lycopene to form and ethylene to do its work, not when it gets more sunlight. Which means the fix for a plant full of green tomatoes in cool weather isn't more sun. It's warmth and a little help managing that ethylene. And because tomatoes ripen after picking, you are not at the mercy of the weather or the calendar. You can take those green tomatoes off the vine and ripen them yourself, indoors, in a warm spot, completely on your own terms. This is the part that changes everything for the gardener panicking about frost. You do not have to leave your tomatoes on the plant, hoping for a warm spell that may never come before the cold kills everything. Once a green tomato has reached its full size, full grown, even if it's still completely green, It has everything it needs to ripen off the vine. There's even a stage growers watch for, called the breaker stage. The very first moment a green tomato shows a hint of color change, a blush at the bottom. A tomato at the breaker stage, or even a mature, solid green one, will ripen beautifully indoors. And many gardeners find that tomatoes finished this way, in a controlled, warm spot, are just as good as vine-ripened, and a lot better than leaving them to struggle on the plant in cold, wet autumn weather, where they're more likely to rot or get damaged than to ripen. So the green tomatoes hanging out there right now are not a lost cause, and they're not waiting on the sun. They're waiting on warmth. And you can give them that warmth indoors, anytime you choose. Which raises the real question. How exactly do you ripen them off the vine, the right way, so they turn red and delicious instead of soft, mealy, or rotten? Because there's a proper method, and there's that classic sunny windowsill mistake that quietly ruins them. And there's a smart way to use those ethylene-producing fruits, like bananas, to speed the whole thing up. Let me show you exactly how to ripen green tomatoes indoors, and the windowsill mistake to avoid. Here's the method, and it flips the usual advice on its head. To ripen green tomatoes indoors, you do not want bright light. You want warmth and a little darkness. Remember what actually ripens the fruit: temperature and ethylene, not sunlight. So the ideal spot is simply somewhere warm and out of direct sun. A kitchen counter away from the window, a cupboard, a cardboard box on a table, a basket in a warm room. The temperature is what matters. Keep them somewhere in that comfortable room temperature range, the upper 60s to low 70s Fahrenheit, around 20 to 22 Celsius, and they'll ripen steadily over days to a couple of weeks. Now the mistake almost everyone makes, the one I promised you: the sunny windowsill. It's the most common piece of tomato advice there is, and it's wrong. People line their green tomatoes up on a hot, bright windowsill, thinking the sun will ripen them. But the fruit doesn't need light, and that windowsill does two harmful things. The direct sun beating through the glass can overheat the fruit and cause it to ripen unevenly or turn soft and mushy on the sunny side. And that fluctuating heat, scorching by day and cool by night, often leads to a poor texture rather than a clean, even ripening. So your tomatoes end up sunburned, mealy, or rotting in patches instead of turning a nice, uniform red. Keep them off the windowsill. A warm, shaded spot with steady temperature gives you far better tomatoes than a bright, baking window ever will. This one change alone saves a lot of green tomato harvests from going to waste. Next, let's use that ethylene to your advantage, because this is where you can really take control of the speed. Since ripening is driven by ethylene gas, you can ripen tomatoes faster by concentrating that gas around them. And the simplest way is to add other fruits that give off a lot of it. A ripe banana or a ripe apple are both ethylene powerhouses. Tuck one in with your green tomatoes, and it floods the area with ripening gas, speeding everything up noticeably. And you can trap that gas around the fruit to intensify the effect. Put your green tomatoes in a paper bag with a ripe banana and fold it closed. Or layer them in a cardboard box with an apple and loosely cover it. The enclosed space holds the ethylene in, surrounding the tomatoes with it, and they ripen faster than they would out in the open air. Paper bag or box, a ripe banana or apple tucked in, somewhere warm and dark. That's the classic, reliable method, and it works like a charm. If you'd rather slow things down instead, say you've got a huge haul and don't want them all ripening at once, you do the opposite. Keep them somewhere cooler, in the 60s Fahrenheit, mid-teens Celsius, spread out in a single layer so the ethylene disperses rather than concentrating, and they'll ripen gradually over a longer stretch. This is how you can make a single end-of-season harvest last for weeks, even a couple of months, ripening a few at a time as you need them. Warmer and enclosed to speed up, cooler and spread out to slow down. You're the one setting the pace now, not the weather. A few practical things make this work better. First, only ripen sound, healthy fruit. Check each tomato and set aside any with damage, soft spots, or signs of disease. because one rotting tomato gives off plenty of ethylene too, and can spoil the whole batch around it. Spread them out so they're not touching, or in a single layer, so a bad one doesn't take its neighbors with it. And check on them every few days, pulling out the ones that have ripened and removing any that show signs of going off. Second, leave a bit of the stem on where you can. It can help slow moisture loss. And third, don't refrigerate them while they're ripening. Cold is exactly what stops the process, and it also kills the flavor and ruins the texture of a tomato. Ripen at room temperature, always. Only once a tomato is fully ripe, and you simply need to hold it a day or two longer should the fridge even come into the conversation. And even then, a ripe tomato is almost always better kept on the counter. There's one more thing worth knowing, because it sets your expectations honestly. The riper a tomato already is when you pick it, the better it'll taste in the end. A tomato picked at that breaker stage, just blushing, or one that's mature green, full-sized, with a glossy, lightening skin, will ripen into a genuinely good tomato. But a small, immature, dark green tomato that never reached full size won't ripen into much. It'll stay rather bland and firm because it was picked too young to have developed properly. So when you're ripening indoors, sort your tomatoes. The full-sized and blushing ones go into your ripening box with real confidence. Those will reward you. The small, hard, dark green ones are better destined for something else entirely, which I'll come to, because there's no sense waiting weeks for a tomato that was never going to ripen well anyway. So now you've got the complete indoor method. A warm, dark spot instead of a sunny windowsill, a paper bag or box with a ripe banana or apple to concentrate the ethylene and speed things along, or a cool single layer to stretch the harvest out. Only healthy fruit, checked regularly, never refrigerated until fully ripe, and your best developed tomatoes chosen for ripening while the immature ones are set aside. With just this, you can take a basket of green tomatoes and turn it into weeks of red, ripe ones on your counter, long after the weather outside stopped cooperating. But all of this assumes the tomatoes are already inside, safe. And that's the crucial piece, because out in the garden, there's a deadline bearing down. The first hard frost of fall, a single cold night that can destroy every tomato still hanging on the vine. So the real question for right now, today, is this. When exactly should you strip those plants? What should you grab? And what do you do the moment that frost is in the forecast so you don't lose a single fruit worth saving? Let me show you exactly how to beat that first frost, and what to do with every last green tomato. Here's the deadline that decides everything. The first hard frost. A frost is simply a freeze, and it ruptures the cells inside a tomato, turning the fruit to mush and ending its life instantly. A tomato touched by frost is finished. It can't ripen, it can't be saved. So the entire game in autumn is to get your fruit off the plants before that first freeze hits, not after. And the good news is that frost almost never arrives as a surprise. It's forecast days ahead. So your job is to watch the weather. And when you see that first frost or hard freeze coming in the forecast, act before it arrives. When that night is on the way, go out and do a full harvest. Strip the plants of every tomato worth saving. And here's how to decide what's worth saving. Take all the full-sized fruit, whether it's already blushing or still solid green, because those are the ones that will ripen well indoors using everything we just covered. Anything that's reached its mature size has a real future on your counter. The tiny, immature, dark green ones you can grab too, but set them aside for a different purpose rather than the ripening box. What you don't do is leave the good fruit out there hoping for one more warm day. The risk isn't worth it once frost is forecast. Better a shelf full of ripening tomatoes indoors than a garden full of frozen ones in the morning. Then bring them in and sort them the way we talked about. The blushing and mature green ones into your warm, dark ripening spot, in paper bags or boxes with a banana or apple. Spread cooler if you want to stretch them out. Done this way, a single pre-frost harvest can keep you in ripening tomatoes for weeks, even into early winter, long after the plants themselves are dead and gone. You essentially move the last stretch of your tomato season indoors, onto your own shelf, where the cold can't touch it. There's an old trick worth mentioning for the bigger pre-frost rescue too. Instead of picking fruit one by one, some gardeners pull the entire plant up by the roots and hang it upside down in a sheltered, frost-free space like a garage, basement, or shed. The tomatoes keep drawing on the plant as they ripen, and come along gradually, right there on the hanging vine. It's a handy way to handle a big plant still loaded with fruit when frost is coming. Whole plant rescue, rather than picking each tomato. Either way, the principle is the same. Get them somewhere frost can't reach, and let them finish on their own time. Now, those small, immature green tomatoes I keep setting aside. Let's deal with them, because they're not waste at all. They were picked too young to ripen into a good red tomato, but green tomatoes are a wonderful ingredient in their own right, firm and tangy. They're the classic base for fried green tomatoes, and they make excellent green tomato salsa, relishes, chutneys, pickles, and more. So nothing has to be thrown away. The big, developed fruit ripens on your shelf into red tomatoes. The little green ones become a whole category of dishes you can only make this time of year. The end of the tomato season, handled right, doesn't waste a single fruit. It just splits your harvest into two different kinds of good food. A quick word on storing the ones that do ripen, because it ties everything together. Once a tomato has ripened to full red, it's at its best eaten within a few days, kept at room temperature on the counter. Resist the fridge. Cold dulls the flavor and turns the flesh mealy, undoing all your careful ripening. Only refrigerate a fully ripe tomato if you absolutely must hold it an extra day or two and can't use it in time. The whole point of ripening them well is to enjoy them at their best, so eat them, cook them, or preserve them while they're at their peak. So let's pull the whole thing together, because it turns what feels like a disaster, a plant full of green tomatoes and frost on the way, into a totally manageable, even satisfying end to the season. Your tomatoes aren't refusing to ripen because they need more sun. Sunlight was never the trigger. They ripen in response to warmth and their own ethylene gas, and when autumn turns cool, the cold simply puts that ripening on pause. But because tomatoes ripen after picking, you hold all the control. Pick your full-sized green and blushing tomatoes. Keep them somewhere warm and dark, never a sunny windowsill. Speed them along with a banana or apple in a paper bag or box, or spread them cool to stretch the harvest for weeks. Watch the forecast, and the day before that first frost, bring in every tomato worth saving, or hang whole plants in a frost-free spot. Ripen the developed ones into red. Turn the small green ones into fried green tomatoes, salsa, and pickles. And keep your ripe tomatoes on the counter, not in the fridge, so they taste their best. That's the deeper lesson I want to leave you with. So much of gardening feels like it's at the mercy of the weather and the calendar, and a lot of it is. But understanding how a plant actually works hands you back the control you thought you'd lost. A tomato doesn't ripen by magic or by sunshine. It ripens by warmth and ethylene, on a schedule you can manage with a cardboard box and a banana. Once you know that, you stop losing your harvest to the first cold night, and start finishing your season on your own terms, right through into winter. Nothing wasted, nothing lost to frost. Just the last of summer, ripening quietly on your shelf. So watch your forecast this week. When you see that first frost coming, go out and bring your tomatoes home. Every last one of them still has somewhere to go. Now, I'd love to make the next video about whatever you're dealing with. There's a long list of things I could cover, but I'd far rather grow what you actually want to watch. So drop a comment and tell me what you'd like me to dig into next. A crop you want to take from planting all the way to storage? An end-of-season problem you keep running into? A way to preserve a glut without losing your mind? Whatever it is, put it below. I read every comment and keep a running list, and the topics people ask for most are the ones I turn into full videos. Yours could be next. I'll see you